This is the story of a plot rooted in the sectarian hatreds of Northern Ireland's Troubles, a vendetta that migrated across the Irish Sea and threatened to erupt onto the streets of Glasgow. It's the story of four men accused of planning to execute one of the most notorious figures in Loyalist history, Jonny Mad Dog Adair. To understand the plot, you have to know the targets. Jonny Adair and his close friend, Sam McCrory, were figures of terror for decades. They were not common criminals. They were high-ranking leaders in the Ulster Defence Association, UDA, a loyalist paramilitary group responsible for countless murders. Adair, in particular, became an almost mythical figure, branded a sectarian murderer, but also a figure who commanded fierce, terrifying loyalty within the loyalist community. After years of violence, prison stints, and internal paramilitary feuds, both men had relocated. They found a new home in Ayrshire, Scotland, seeking a quiet life away from the constant threat of Belfast. They may have thought they were safe, but the ghosts of the Troubles had a long reach. For some, Adair and McCrory represented unforgivable crimes, the murder of innocent Catholics. And in the eyes of a small, determined group of men, they deserved to be hunted down and killed. This wasn't a gang rivalry for money or territory. This was a political assassination plot driven by years of bitter sectarian hatred, and the executioners were already in place. The man at the center of this deadly plot was Anton Duffy. According to the evidence presented in court, Duffy held an intense, burning hatred for Adair. He genuinely believed that Adair and McCrory had murdered innocent Catholics, and he was determined to exact a violent, final vengeance. It was this motive, the desire to settle an old, deadly score, that set the entire conspiracy in motion. Duffy didn't plan this alone. Along with him were Martin Hughes, Paul Sands, and John Gorman. These four men would soon find themselves standing in the dock of the High Court in Glasgow, facing charges that could land them in prison for life. The plot began to take shape as early as 2013, but the details only came to light years later during a meticulous police investigation and the subsequent trial. This wasn't a half-baked plan. The conspirators discussed a method of assassination so extreme it could only be described as a terrorist act. The prosecution's case rested heavily on conversations recorded by the police. These recordings provided a chilling glimpse into the minds of the plotters and the scale of their ambition. They weren't just talking about a drive-by shooting. They were planning a calculated execution. The men allegedly discussed using an AK-47 assault rifle, a weapon of war, and even more chillingly, armor-piercing rounds. The level of firepower suggests they intended to bypass any protective measures and ensure the targets were killed instantly and decisively. This was the kind of weaponry designed to kill rapidly and indiscriminately, placing the public at severe risk. The court heard testimony from a former cellmate of Anton Duffy. This witness described Duffy's absolute fixation on his targets. Duffy's deep-seated hatred meant he viewed this not as murder, but as a moral imperative, a historic act of retribution. He believed he was taking out a monster. But the men weren't done with just Adair and McCrory. The investigation revealed the chilling ambition of the conspirators extended beyond sectarian vendettas. Anton Duffy and John Gorman also faced separate charges for plotting to murder a man much closer to home, Derek McGill, the former governor of Barlinnie Prison. This second plot showed a frightening criminal enterprise operating under the surface in Scotland, capable of targeting not just former paramilitary figures, but high-ranking prison officials as well. It solidified the image of Duffy and Gorman as serious, cold-blooded criminals who posed a substantial threat to public safety. With two plots underway, a murder method involving an AK-47, and motivations stretching from sectarian revenge to personal vendetta, the police and prosecutors knew they had intercepted something truly deadly. The clock was ticking toward a potential bloodbath on the streets of Scotland. Thankfully, the authorities were able to move in and disrupt the plan before any shots were fired. The arrests brought the four men, Anton Duffy, Martin Hughes, Paul Sands, and John Gorman, to the High Court in Glasgow. The trial took place in 2015 and lasted 38 days, drawing international attention because of the high-profile targets and the sheer audacity of the conspiracy. The courtroom was the final battleground for a conflict that began decades earlier in Belfast. The prosecution laid out its case meticulously. They presented the covert recordings detailing the weapons and the planning. They presented the testimony of Duffy's former cellmate, detailing the intense hatred and motivation. They argued that these men were not simply fantasizing, they were actively preparing to commit murder. Of course, the defense fought hard. They would have argued about the reliability of the informers and the context of the recordings, perhaps suggesting the men were simply boasting or engaging in criminal chatter that didn't constitute a true conspiracy. They had to convince the jury that this was not a terrorist plot, but merely the dangerous talk of angry men. The outcome of the trial hung heavy in the air. A conviction would stop a terrorist act. An acquittal, particularly for the main plotters, would mean these dangerous men were free to pursue their deadly vendettas. The fate of the four men, and potentially the lives of Adair and McCrory, rested with the jury. After weeks of testimony, the jury retired to deliberate. The tension in the court must have been palpable. When they returned, they delivered a verdict that contained a dramatic and unexpected split. In July 2015, after 38 grueling days of trial, a significant verdict was delivered. John Gorman was acquitted of the charges related to the plot to murder Adair and McCrory. While he still faced the charges related to the prison governor, he was cleared of the high-profile sectarian assassination plot. This acquittal highlights the complexity of proving conspiracy. While Gorman was certainly associated with Duffy and the other men, the jury clearly found that the prosecution had not met the high bar of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that Gorman was an active participant in the specific plan to kill Adair and McCrory. His connection to the other plot, however, remained a major concern. But while Gorman walked free from the major charge, the vast majority of the evidence had been aimed at the other three men. The recorded plans, the expressed hatred, the discussions of weapons, it all pointed toward a fully formed, deadly intention. Just a month later, in August 2015, the verdicts for the remaining three were handed down. Anton Duffy, Martin Hughes, and Paul Sands were all found guilty of the plot to murder Jonny Adair and Sam McCrory. The jury had accepted the prosecution's argument that this was a genuine, deadly conspiracy. The convictions represented a massive success for law enforcement and counterterrorism agencies. But the question remained, what sentence would be appropriate for men who plotted a murder using an AK-47? Following the convictions, the court proceeded to sentencing. The trial judge, Lord Beckett, was tasked with passing judgment on a crime that transcended simple gang violence. Duffy, Hughes, and Sands were handed substantial, lengthy sentences for their roles in the conspiracy. The court made it clear that plotting an assassination with this level of violence and motivation would not be tolerated in Scottish society. Perhaps the most significant comment on the outcome came in the analysis of the case. As reported by The Guardian, the conviction was praised for preventing a potentially deadly terrorist attack on the streets of Scotland. This case proved that the sectarian hatreds of the past are not confined to Northern Ireland. The plot to kill Jonny Adair and Sam McCrory was a stark, chilling reminder that old feuds can simmer for years and cross international borders, capable of bringing extreme violence to any city. The efforts of the police and prosecution ensured that a bloody chapter of history was not rewritten in Glasgow. The Glasgow terror plot remains one of the most serious cases of organized political violence to reach a Scottish court in the modern era. 3 men jailed, 1 acquitted, and a potential bloodbath averted. What do you think about the sentences handed down? And do you believe the danger from these historic paramilitary feuds is truly over? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more crime stories.